What if the very pain you're trying to escape is the force that will shape your greatness? We all dream of success, but behind every champion, every legend, there's a story written not in comfort, but in sacrifice, struggle, and moments that nearly broke them. Today, let's uncover the truth. Greatness is born in pain. Picture a young athlete, training alone in the dark while the world sleeps. His body aches, his mind screams to quit, yet he pushes forward. People laugh at his dreams, critics call him too weak, and failures pile up like heavy chains. But instead of breaking him, that pain sharpens him. Every rejection becomes fuel. Every setback teaches him resilience. The loneliness, the sweat, the tears, these become his silent teachers. And one day, the same world that doubted him watches in awe as he stands on the stage of victory. Greatness doesn't come from talent alone. It comes from walking through pain, refusing to surrender, and transforming wounds into strength. That is the true price of greatness. The night was heavy with silence. Streetlights buzzed weakly above the cracked pavement, their pale glow spilling like tired whispers onto the empty road. Each step he took echoed against the walls of forgotten buildings, the sound bouncing back as if mocking his solitude. The boy, barely 17, walked alone, sweat still clinging to his shirt after hours of practice. His shoes were worn thin, the laces frayed, but he dragged them forward as if they were chains he had chosen to carry. He pulled his jacket tighter against the cold wind. Around him, the city was asleep. Behind glowing windows, families laughed over dinners, couples curled under blankets, children dreamed safely in their beds. He imagined what it might feel like to belong to such warmth, to sit at a table where encouragement flowed freely, where failure didn't bring shame but lessons. But that wasn't his story. His story was pain disguised as discipline. His nights were filled not with laughter, but with the sound of his own breathing, too fast, too hard, as he pushed his body past its limits while no one was watching. There was no audience to cheer him on, no coach waiting at the finish line, no hand to clap his back and say, "I'm proud of you." What he had was emptiness, empty streets, empty encouragement, and sometimes, it felt, an empty future. And yet, he kept going. That was the paradox of struggle. When everything in you begs to stop, the choice to continue is what begins to shape greatness. He remembered the taunts from earlier that day. Classmates laughing as he stumbled in gym, voices dripping with cruelty. "You'll never make it. You're too weak." They said it casually, as if they were stating a fact, like pointing at the sky and declaring it blue. He laughed with them on the outside, but their words dug deep, carving wounds he carried into the night. He trained harder because of those words, but he also hurt deeper because of them. At home, the struggle was no different. His mother worked 2 jobs, rarely home before midnight. His father was a ghost in the form of a man who had once promised dreams and delivered only silence. Bills piled high on the kitchen counter. The fridge hummed with emptiness more often than it offered food. Greatness, for him, wasn't about medals or fame. Greatness was about survival, about proving that he could rise from circumstances that had every reason to bury him. So he trained when no one believed in him. He practiced when his body begged for rest. He ran through alleys that smelled of rust and rain, his lungs burning, legs aching, because he knew that pain was temporary but quitting would last forever. The cracks in his shoes were reminders. Progress doesn't wait for perfect conditions. That night, as he walked home, he stopped at the basketball court by the corner store. The fence rattled in the wind, the hoops net torn in half, swaying like a ghost of forgotten dreams. He picked up a ball left behind by someone earlier. Under the cold fluorescent light, he started to shoot. Miss after miss, the ball clanged against the rim. His hands were numb, his breath a cloud in the air. Frustration built inside him, tears stinging at the corners of his eyes. He dropped the ball and sat on the ground, pulling his knees to his chest. For a moment, he let the weight of it all crush him. The loneliness, the doubt, the fear that maybe everyone was right. Maybe he really wasn't enough. The silence of the streets pressed on him, louder than any cheer could have been. But then, in that silence, something stirred. A thought, faint but insistent. What if this pain is the very thing that will shape me? He stood again, picked up the ball, and aimed once more. His arms trembled, his vision blurred, but this time swish. The ball fell clean through the hoop. One shot. One small victory. He smiled through his tears, the first genuine smile of the night. It wasn't triumph that mattered yet, it was persistence. And persistence was born right there, on empty streets, under flickering lights, where no one clapped, no one watched, but history began in silence. The morning light crept in slowly, spilling across the cracked walls of his bedroom. He hadn't slept much. His muscles ached from last night's relentless practice. He rubbed his swollen eyes, staring at the peeling paint above his bed, where water stains had turned into maps of places he would never see. At least not yet. The alarm on his cheap phone buzzed, its cracked screen flickering. He turned it off quickly, not wanting to wake his mother, who had just come home from her night shift. She deserved a few hours of peace, even if his life was anything but peaceful. He slipped on the same torn shoes and left quietly, the door creaking as if even the house was tired of holding itself together. The streets were still half asleep, littered with yesterday's newspapers fluttering in the wind. He clutched his worn-out backpack tighter as he headed toward the old basketball court again, his sanctuary and his battleground. The court was deserted. The net still hung in tatters, the paint on the lines nearly gone, but to him it was more than concrete and rust. It was the place where he fought his demons, where every missed shot was an argument with himself, and every made basket was a small promise that maybe he was getting closer. He began to dribble. The ball slapped against the ground, each bounce echoing against the empty fence. His palms stung, his fingers numb from the cold, but he kept moving. Sweat soon mingled with the morning air, dripping down his forehead as he pushed himself harder. He ran drills alone, sprinting from one end of the court to the other, lungs screaming for rest. The world might have thought of him as invisible, but in that moment he felt alive. His mind wandered to the voices that haunted him, the laughter of classmates, the sharp criticism of neighbors who whispered, "Why waste your time? He'll never make it." Their doubts clung to him like shadows, but instead of crushing him, they fueled his fire. Each taunt was fuel. Each sneer was a challenge. The ball slipped from his tired hands, rolling across the cracked pavement. He collapsed onto the ground, his chest rising and falling like waves crashing against the shore. His body screamed at him to stop, to give up this fight for greatness that seemed so far away. But his spirit, the part of him no one could see, refused to quit. He whispered into the morning air, his voice trembling, "I won't give up. Not like this." As if answering his vow, a gust of wind swept through the court, rattling the fence, sending a swirl of autumn leaves dancing around him. He watched them rise and fall, like failure and persistence, always intertwined. And he understood then. Falling was inevitable, but rising was a choice. He pushed himself back to his feet, sweat soaking through his shirt, and picked up the ball again. His hand shook, his legs felt like stone, but he forced himself to keep going. Shot after shot, miss after miss, until finally swish. Then another, and another. The rhythm built, fragile but steady, like a heartbeat refusing to stop. Hours passed unnoticed. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the court. Children began to pass by on their way to school, glancing at him with curiosity. Some whispered, some laughed, but he didn't hear them anymore. All he heard was the bounce of the ball, the sound of his persistence carving itself into reality. By the time he finally stopped, his shirt was drenched, his knees scraped, his lungs raw. But inside, something had shifted. He no longer trained to silence the voices outside. He trained to silence the one inside, the voice of doubt that told him he couldn't. And with every ounce of pain, he was beginning to win that battle. He picked up his bag, slung it over his shoulder, and walked away from the court, leaving behind not just sweat and tears, but a piece of himself that had learned. Greatness doesn't wait for applause. It grows in silence, watered by struggle. The school hallway smelled faintly of disinfectant and old paper. Lockers slammed in every direction as laughter filled the air, sharp and careless. He walked through the noise, with his head slightly bowed, the strap of his faded backpack digging into his shoulder. To most, he was invisible. To others, He was a target, the boy with big dreams in a world too small for them. He moved carefully, like someone carrying glass in his chest, afraid of breaking under even the slightest pressure. The voices trailed behind him. Why does he try so hard? He'll never make it. Snickers echoed like stones hitting water, rippling through his confidence. He kept walking, refusing to look back, but each word etched itself deeper into him. At lunch, he sat alone at the edge of the cafeteria. The tables around him overflowed with chatter, trays clattering, friends trading stories of the weekend. He unwrapped a sandwich that was nothing more than 2 slices of bread and a thin spread of peanut butter. It wasn't much, but it was what his mother could afford. He didn't complain. Instead, he chewed slowly, eyes fixed on the clock above the wall, counting the minutes until he could escape. His dream felt heavy here. In the silence of being overlooked, the weight of loneliness pressed against his ribs. But it was in that very silence that he began to shape his resolve. He pulled a notebook from his bag, the cover bent, pages filled with scribbles of practice drills, motivational quotes, even drawings of courts and stadiums where he hoped one day to play. While others laughed and lived easily, he planned. Each line of ink was a promise to himself, a contract written in private, in solitude. After school, while friends rushed to arcades or parks, he walked back to the broken court. The world didn't see it, but that cracked concrete was his cathedral. He dropped his bag on the ground, lifted the ball, and started again. The rhythm of bouncing echoed into the twilight, merging with the sound of cicadas in the trees. His hands blistered, skin peeling from endless dribbles. His knees ached from sudden stops. He winced each time his foot landed too hard, but he didn't stop. Pain was the tax for progress, and he was willing to pay every cent. As the evening grew darker, he collapsed against the fence, sweat soaking his shirt. His chest rose and fell like a storm-tossed sea. Above him, the stars blinked into existence one by one, scattered like tiny sparks of hope across the black sky. He whispered, barely audible, one day they'll see." But the stars didn't answer, and maybe that was the point. Greatness didn't come with applause in the beginning. It came with silence. It came with nights where the only sound was your own breath and the ball echoing against the ground. It came with carrying dreams no one else believed in, dreams that felt heavier than the world itself. The silence became his companion, his harshest critic, and his truest ally. It taught him patience. It taught him to listen to the voice within that said, "Keep going," even when everything outside screamed, "Stop." And in that silence, he began to transform. The alarm screamed at 5 a.m., rattling on the chipped nightstand like it was mocking him for daring to rest. His body refused at first, muscles stiff, legs heavy, shoulders sore from yesterday's punishment on the broken court. For a brief moment, he considered turning it off, sinking back into the warmth of his thin blanket. But then, as if something deep inside jolted him awake, he swung his feet onto the cold floor. Dreams didn't wait for comfort. He tied the frayed laces of his shoes tighter, pulling them until his fingers turned white. The shoes were falling apart, soles worn smooth from months of relentless practice. Yet to him, they were like armor. Every scratch, every tear was proof of the battles he had fought in silence. The streets outside were deserted. Mist clung to the ground, curling around lampposts like ghosts of the night before. He began to run, his breath puffing white in the cold air. Each footfall echoed across the empty blocks, steady, determined. With no crowd to push him, he became his own audience, his own coach, his own motivator. As he ran, memories crashed into him like waves. The laughter in the locker room, the sting of being picked last, the way some teachers looked at him with pity, as though his future had already been written and it didn't include greatness. The pain rose like fire in his chest, but instead of slowing him, it pushed him faster. Pain became fuel. Loneliness became his training partner. By the time the sun began to rise, his shirt was drenched, sticking to his skin. He stopped at the edge of the old court, bent over, hands on his knees, lungs begging for air. The world around him was still waking up. Milk trucks rattled past, shopkeepers unlocked their doors, but he had already lived a lifetime that morning. He walked onto the court, ball in hand, and began his drills. Dribble left, dribble right, crossover, shoot. Mississippi retrieve. Shoot again. Each failure cut like a blade, but he refused to let it scar him. He reminded himself of a truth few understood. Every missed shot was a step closer to the one that would go in. Hours later, while his peers shuffled half-awake into classrooms, he dragged himself through the school gates, shirt still damp with sweat, hair sticking to his forehead. He sat at the back of math class, numbers blurring on the board. The teacher droned on, but his mind was elsewhere, on the court, on the drills, on the dream. And yet, there was another battle he fought silently, exhaustion. While others laughed through the day, he hid yawns behind his hand, his body begging for rest. While friends made plans for the weekend, he wondered how many more hours his shoes could survive before splitting open completely. No one saw those struggles. They saw only the surface, the quiet boy with calloused hands and tired eyes. During lunch, he slipped away, notebook in hand. He sketched out strategies, mapped drills, wrote down quotes that lit a fire inside him. Words like, fall 7 times, stand up 8. He clung to those words like lifelines, breathing them in whenever the silence threatened to crush him. By evening, he was back on the court again. His body was nearly broken, his spirit constantly tested. And yet, there he stood, sweat dripping, lungs screaming, choosing once again to fight the hidden battles no one else could see. Because he understood something most didn't. Greatness doesn't happen in the spotlight. It is built in the shadows, in the hidden hours, in the quiet sacrifices that no one applauds. The rain began just as he stepped onto the court that evening. Thin droplets at first, falling like whispers, then heavier, striking the cracked pavement with relentless rhythm. Most would have run for shelter, but he stayed. The court had always been his battlefield, and tonight the storm would be his opponent. The ball grew slick in his hands, sliding away with every dribble. His shoes squelched with water, socks soaked through, but he refused to stop. He sprinted across the length of the court, each stride sending up tiny sprays of rainwater. His breath came in ragged bursts, but he welcomed the burn. Pain meant progress. Exhaustion meant he was pushing further than yesterday. Yet with every missed shot, doubt crept in. What if they're right? What if he'll never make it? The voices in his head grew louder than the rain. They were echoes of every laugh, every insult, every dismissive shake of the head. He bent over, hands on his knees, the weight of the world pressing down on him. He could almost hear his classmates. You'll never be good enough. He could almost feel the silence at home, where dreams were luxuries, not necessities. He could almost see the future they predicted for him, ordinary, invisible, forgotten. The ball slipped from his trembling hands and rolled across the court, stopping at the fence. For a moment, he let it go, watching it rest there, lifeless, as if daring him to walk away. His chest heaved, tears mixing with raindrops on his face. Walking away would be easy. Quitting would be easy. But then a memory struck him, his mother, dragging herself home after a second job. Exhaustion etched into her every step. She never complained, never asked for more than she had. She bore her pain silently, and in that silence, she became the strongest person he knew. If she could endure, so could he. He staggered toward the ball, picked it up, and clutched it against his chest. Not tonight, he whispered to himself. Not ever. With renewed determination, he began again. Dribble, pivot, shoot. The ball arced high, slicing through the rain. Swish. The sound was almost drowned by the storm, but to him it was thunderous. A declaration. Shot after shot, he continued, body drenched, teeth chattering, but spirit unbroken. Every basket was a blow against doubt. Every made shot a reminder that persistence was louder than fear. By the time the storm passed, he was soaked to the bone, shivering, lips tinged blue, but his heart burned hotter than ever. As he walked home, shoes squelching with every step, he realized something profound. Storms will always come. In life, in dreams, in every pursuit worth chasing. But storms are not signs to stop. They are tests to see who will endure. And on that rain-soaked night, he chose to endure. The classroom buzzed with chatter, pencils tapping, laughter spilling from every corner. But at the far end, near the window streaked with fingerprints and dust, He sat alone at his desk. His notebook lay open in front of him, pages filled not with algebra or essays, but with scribbled drills, motivational quotes, and rough sketches of courts he'd never played on. His teacher's voice faded into the background like static, replaced by the pounding rhythm of a ball in his mind. He glanced around the room. Groups of friends leaned on each other, trading jokes and secrets. A few whispered, their eyes darting toward him, grins tugging at their lips. He didn't need to hear the words. He had memorized them already. Dreamer. Fool. Waste of time. His pen trembled slightly in his hand, but he kept writing. Pain is temporary. Quitting lasts forever. He underlined it twice, pressing the pen so hard the tip nearly tore through the page. Lunch came, and once again, his table remained empty. He unwrapped his sandwich, quietly while the noise of the cafeteria swelled around him. Laughter, clattering trays, soda cans cracking open. His food was simple, barely enough, but he chewed slowly, imagining the taste of victory, imagining the day when this silence would be replaced by roaring crowds. After school, while others spilled into cars or gathered in groups at the corner store, he walked a long way home. The broken court called to him, like it always did. The fence rattled in the breeze, the lines on the concrete almost invisible now, but to him it was a palace, a proving ground. He set his bag down, picked up the ball, and began again. Dribble. Sprint. Shoot. Mississippi retrieve. Shoot again. His movements were mechanical at first, driven by discipline more than desire. But as the hours passed, sweat dripping, muscles straining, something shifted. The loneliness that haunted him in classrooms and cafeterias seemed to melt away here. On this court, the only voice that mattered was his own. The sun dipped low, painting the sky with streaks of orange and purple. Still he stayed. His hands blistered. His legs shook, but he pressed on. Each shot was a declaration. I will not give up. I will not stay invisible. By the time darkness fell, his shirt clung to his body, soaked with sweat. The streetlights flickered on, one by one, casting long shadows across the court. He picked up his bag, shoulders aching, and began the long walk home. Passing by storefronts, he caught glimpses of other kids inside, laughing, carefree, their lives untouched by the weight he carried. For a moment, doubt surged again. Why me? Why do I have to fight so hard for something others take for granted? But then he remembered, greatness was never meant to be easy. Greatness demanded sacrifice, and his sacrifice was solitude, long hours, and a desk that always sat empty. He walked on, the night swallowing him, but inside, a fire burned brighter than the lights above, because he knew loneliness was shaping him into someone unstoppable. The clock on the kitchen wall ticked past midnight, each second echoing through the silence of the small apartment. The neighborhood outside had long since gone quiet, streetlights humming, stray dogs rustling through garbage, a car passing only once in a while. Everyone else slept, everyone except him. His textbooks were spread open on the worn kitchen table, but the words blurred together, black ink swimming on white pages. His eyelids drooped, heavy with exhaustion, yet his hands refused to rest. He gripped a pencil, writing and rewriting notes, equations, and vocabulary words. But beside the schoolwork lay another notebook, the one that truly mattered. Inside, in messy handwriting, were practice schedules, game strategies, and motivational quotes cut from old magazines. He leaned back, rubbing his eyes. The room smelled faintly of detergent and old wood. The fridge hummed softly behind him, nearly empty. His stomach growled, but he pushed it aside. Hunger had become a familiar companion, one that sharpened his focus rather than dulled it. The window reflected his face, tired and pale, shadows etched under his eyes. He stared at himself, almost not recognizing the boy who sat there. He looked older, harder, not because of years, but because of the battles he was fighting in silence. He pushed the books aside and stood. Quietly, so as not to wake his mother, he slipped on his sneakers, grabbed his ball, and stepped into the night. The air was cool, the streets dim. His breath puffed in small clouds as he jogged toward the court. Midnight was his hour. No distractions, no mocking eyes, just him, the ball, and the dream. The chain link fence creaked as he pushed through. The court stretched before him, cracked but familiar, lit only by a single flickering street lamp. He dropped the ball, its echo bouncing off the empty silence. Dribble. Step. Shoot. The ball smacked against the rim, then rolled away. He chased it, breath ragged, chest burning. Again. 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 Hours passed unnoticed. Sweat drenched his clothes, his arms heavy, but he didn't stop. Every shot carried weight. The weight of his family's struggle, the weight of his own loneliness, the weight of everyone who doubted him. The sound of the ball against the concrete was like a heartbeat, steady, unrelenting. At one point, he collapsed onto the bench, chest heaving. He tilted his head back, staring at the stars peeking through the clouds. They seemed so far away, untouchable, yet somehow within reach. He whispered to the night, his voice cracking, "I won't give up. I can't." And in that quiet confession, he felt something stir inside him. Not just hope, something deeper. Resolve. Midnight wasn't just a time anymore. It was a sanctuary, a reminder that even when the world slept, he was still moving forward. By the time dawn painted the horizon with streaks of pink and gold, he dragged himself home, sneakers soaked, eyes bloodshot. He would shower quickly, change, and head to school as if nothing happened. No one would know. No one ever did. But deep down he knew. Every midnight shadow carved strength into him. Every secret session brought him closer. And though he walked halls invisible, he was building something no one could see yet, an unbreakable will. The cafeteria was alive with noise, laughter, trays clattering, sneakers squeaking on the tiled floor. Groups clustered together, conversations weaving into one another, but he sat at the corner table alone. His tray carried only a carton of milk and a bruised apple. He kept his head down, pretending to focus on the pages of his notebook. But even here, the voices found him. "Why are you always sitting by yourself?" A boy called across the room, smirking. His friends laughed, one mimicking the way he walked, shoulders slightly hunched as if bracing for impact. Another chimed in, "Yo, he think he's gonna be somebody. Man, look at him, he ain't nothing." The words stung, sharp as glass. He clenched his fists beneath the table, pressing his nails into his palms until it hurt. The anger swelled in his chest, but he refused to let it spill. He'd learned long ago that fighting back only gave them what they wanted. Silence was his shield. Still, the laughter echoed long after the voices faded. Even at night, when the apartment was quiet, he could hear them, broken voices that played on repeat, feeding doubt. He wondered sometimes if maybe they were right. Maybe he was reaching too far, asking too much of himself. That evening, when he stepped into his room, he didn't turn on the light. The shadows felt safer. He dropped onto the mattress, staring at the ceiling, fighting the tide of despair pulling at him. His chest tightened as if the walls were closing in. He wanted to scream, to let it all out, but no sound came. Just silence. Minutes blurred into hours. Finally, he sat up, grabbed his notebook, and began to write. Not homework, not drills, but raw words straight from his heart. He wrote about pain, about loneliness, about how it felt to be invisible. His pen scratched furiously across the page, as if carving his soul into paper. The broken voices in his head grew quieter with every line. By the time he stopped, tears streaked his cheeks, but his breathing was steady. He closed the notebook gently, like it was a friend who had listened without judgment. Then he stood, grabbed his ball, and slipped into the night again. The court welcomed him with its familiar silence. Under the faint glow of the street lamp, he dribbled, pivoted, shot. Each bounce was louder than the voices, each swish a reminder that their laughter didn't define him. He whispered into the night air, breathless but fierce. "They don't know me. They don't know what I carry." For the first time, the broken voices felt small. They still echoed, yes, but against the rhythm of his drive, they began to fade. Out here, in the solitude of sweat and determination, his own voice was finally louder. By dawn, as he walked home with blistered hands and aching legs, he carried something new within him, the beginning of belief. The world could break him with words, but as long as he kept moving, kept playing, those broken voices would never win. The city slept, but his world never did. The streets were empty, only the hum of a passing car and the distant bark of a dog breaking the silence. He tightened the laces on his worn-out sneakers, picked up his ball, and stepped into the night. The court waited for him, cracked lines glowing faintly beneath the street lamp's flicker. Every bounce of the ball echoed against the concrete, against the brick walls of the nearby buildings, against the hollow places in his chest. Dribble. Step back. Shoot. Mississippi retrieve. Again. 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 The rhythm was relentless, like a heartbeat louder than the silence of his apartment. The world told him to rest, but his mind wouldn't let him. The broken voices from the day followed him here, whispering doubts in the corners of the dark. You're not good enough. You'll never make it. You're wasting your life. He heard them, but he answered with the ball. Sharp crossovers, quick pivots, sweat flying into the cool night air. The pain in his leg screamed at him to stop, but pain had become an old companion, one he no longer feared. He remembered the hunger at lunch, the empty seat at the cafeteria, the laughter that wasn't meant for him, but at him. Each memory burned hotter than the cramps in his calves. At one point, his shot at the rim bounced high and rolled out. He froze, staring at the ball as it spun to a stop at his feet. For a moment, he felt the weight of it all, the exhaustion, the loneliness, the endless cycle of trying. His chest tightened. His breath hitched. The court felt too big, the night too quiet. He bent down, picked up the ball, and pressed it to his forehead. Eyes closed, he whispered, I can't quit. Not here. Not now. And with that, he moved again. Faster. Harder. Until the sound of his sneakers against the pavement drowned out the doubts. Until his arms ached so much he could barely lift them. Until the ball slipped from his grip and rolled into the darkness. He collapsed onto the ground, lying flat on his back, staring at the stars. Sweat trickled into his eyes, but he didn't wipe it away. The sky stretched endlessly above him, vast and uncaring. Yet somehow, beneath that endlessness, he felt small and powerful all at once. Small because he was just one kid with a dream. Powerful because he hadn't given up. A whisper escaped his lips, so soft it almost got lost in the wind. One day they'll hear me. One day they'll know my name. The night gave no answer, only silence. But in that silence, he found strength. When he finally stood, muscles trembling, he picked up his ball and started the long walk home. The city lights blurred in the distance, and though the darkness pressed in on every side, inside him, a light flickered brighter than ever. Morning sunlight leaked through the thin curtains of his room, striking the floorboards with a golden hue. He sat at the edge of the bed, still in yesterday's sweat-stained clothes, sneakers unlaced. His body screamed for rest, but his mind had already moved beyond the pain. He was thinking of tomorrow, not the tomorrow marked on calendars, but the one he carried inside, the one he fought for in silence. His little sister peeked into the room. Her hair was messy, her small hands clutching a broken doll. "You're up already?" she asked softly. He nodded, forcing a smile. She didn't need to know how heavy his nights had been. She didn't need to hear about the broken voices that chased him into the dark. She only needed hope. So, he knelt down, ruffled her hair, and said, "One day, you'll see me on TV. Then you'll tell everyone, 'That's my brother.'" Her eyes widened, lighting up with belief, the kind of belief he wished he could borrow for himself. Later, he walked to school, shoulders stiff under the weight of stairs. The same bullies leaned against the lockers, their words ready like knives. "Yo, superstar," one sneered. "Practicing in the dark doesn't make you chosen. You're just wasting your time." He didn't answer. He had learned the power of silence, how it cut deeper than any comeback. But inside, his chest burned. He wondered, briefly, if they were right, if all those hours were just shadows chasing shadows. But then, in his mind, he replayed the sound of the ball bouncing against the cracked court, the rhythm steady like a heartbeat. He remembered the stars above him, silent witnesses to his promise. "One day, they'll hear me. One day, they'll know my name." That memory alone was enough to push him forward. That night, after homework was done and the world seemed to exhale into quiet, he walked again to the court. The air was cool, carrying the scent of rain from earlier. Puddles reflected the street lamp's dim glow, turning the cracked pavement into a mirror of stars. He stood still for a moment, listening, not to the city, not to the silence, but to himself. His heart beat steady. His breath came sharp, and in that quiet, he whispered to the night, "I'll keep going, no matter what." With each bounce of the ball, he wasn't just practicing. He was writing his tomorrow. His sneakers slid across the pavement. His arms ached, but his soul felt alive. Every shot was a prayer. Every layup was a vow. Every swish was proof that tomorrow was worth fighting for. He played until his hands blistered again, until his shirt clung to his skin, until exhaustion blurred his vision. Yet, even when his body begged him to stop, he pushed once more, whispering through clenched teeth, "This pain is the price of greatness." When he finally collapsed onto the court, lying flat with his arms spread wide, he looked up at the night sky again. The stars shimmered faintly through the haze. For the first time, he didn't feel small beneath them. He felt like he belonged. Tomorrow wasn't here yet, but tonight, he had carved one step closer to it. The night was colder than usual. A sharp wind sliced through the narrow alleys as he pulled his worn hoodie tighter around his shoulders. His sneakers slapped against the pavement, echoing like hollow drums in the stillness. He wasn't heading home. Not yet. Tonight felt heavier, like the world had loaded every ounce of doubt and hardship onto his back. Earlier that day, he had failed an exam. The teacher's disappointment was obvious, written across her furrowed brows. "You have potential," she said, "but you're wasting it." Those words stung, not because she was wrong, but because she didn't know. She didn't know about the long nights of practice, the hours he spent chasing a dream instead of memorizing history dates. She didn't know about the exhaustion that pulled him down like chains. And then, after school, the whispers came again. The same group of boys laughed at him in the hallway. Future star? More like future nobody. He clenched his fists, jaw tight, but said nothing. He didn't have the luxury of losing control. Now, under the dim glow of the streetlights, the pressure built inside him like a storm. He reached the court, ball in hand, and started dribbling with fury. Each bounce cracked against the pavement, louder, angrier. His breaths came sharp, his eyes burning. He drove to the hoop, missed. Tried again, missed. Over and over until frustration boiled over. With a roar, he hurled the ball across the court. It hit the chain-link fence and rolled into the shadows. His chest heaved. Hot tears stung his eyes. He dropped to his knees, fists pressed into the asphalt. "Why?" he whispered hoarsely. "Why does it have to be this hard?" The silence answered him. No cheers, no applause, no recognition, just the creak of the old hoops swaying in the wind. For a moment, he thought about quitting, just walking away, giving in to the voices that told him he'd never make it. He imagined what it would be like to live quietly, to stop fighting, to stop hurting. But then, in the distance, he heard footsteps. He looked up. An old man, stooped and carrying a plastic bag of groceries, paused at the edge of the court. The man watched him for a moment, then said softly, "You remind me of someone." The boy wiped his face quickly, embarrassed. "Sorry, I didn't mean to make noise." The man shook his head. "No, don't apologize. I see fight in you. Don't lose it." With that, he shuffled away into the night, leaving behind only his words. The boy sat there, stunned. Just a few simple words, but they struck deeper than all the insults combined. Fight. Don't lose it. Slowly, he rose to his feet. He walked into the shadows, retrieved his ball, and stood at the free throw line. His hands still trembled, but he steadied his breathing. Bounce. Bounce. Shot. The ball soared, arced, and swished through the net. His lips curved into the faintest smile. He whispered into the cold air, "I won't quit. Not now. Not ever." The breaking point had come, but instead of breaking him, it carved him sharper, stronger. The night had tested him, and though bruised, though exhausted, he was still standing, and that was enough to keep the fire alive. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the cracked blinds of his small room, cutting sharp lines across the peeling paint. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his mind heavy with the echoes of last night. The old man's words lingered in him like an ember refusing to die. I see fight in you. Don't lose it. But doubt still clung to him, wrapping itself around his chest like a tightening rope. As he pulled himself out of bed, he caught sight of his reflection in the cracked mirror. Eyes ringed with exhaustion, shoulders slumped, a boy carrying 1,000 battles that no one else could see. For a fleeting moment, he wondered if the mirror was telling the truth, that maybe he wasn't strong enough. At breakfast, his mother noticed a silence. She moved around the tiny kitchen, her face lined with quiet worry. "You're not eating," she said softly. He shrugged. "Not hungry." She sat across from him, her hands folded, eyes searching his. "I know things are hard right now, but I need you to believe in yourself the way I believe in you." Her voice cracked, and he saw how much she was holding back. Her fears, her sacrifices, her endless prayers that he would break free of the life pressing in on them. Her words hurt, not because they were harsh, but because they were drenched in love. He wanted to believe for her, if not for himself. He forced down a bite of toast, nodded weakly, and left for school. At school, the whispers returned. The same mocking laughter, the same sideways glances. Teachers scolded him for not paying attention. Friends he thought he had were nowhere when he needed them. Each insult, each cold look dug into him, leaving invisible scars. By afternoon, his shoulders sagged under the weight. He walked home slowly, dragging his feet. As he passed the court, the ball in his bag felt heavier than usual. He didn't want to play. He didn't want to fail again. He wanted silence, escape, an end to the constant noise in his head. But something pulled him inside. The court was empty, bathed in the golden glow of the setting sun. He dropped his bag, pulled out the ball, and stood at the line. For a long time, he just stared at the hoop, hearing the voices of doubt whispering, "You'll never make it. You'll always fall short. Give up." His hand shook, but he dribbled. Once, twice, shot. The ball clanged against the rim, bouncing away. He sighed, shoulders collapsing. The whispers grew louder, "See? Not good enough." But then another memory surfaced, his mother's voice at the table. "I need you to believe in yourself the way I believe in you." He wiped sweat from his brow, squared his shoulders, and tried again. Bounce, bounce, shot, swish. This time he didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He just breathed slow, steady, controlled. Again, again, again. Each shot drowned out the voices a little more. Each swish became a defiance, a small rebellion against the weight pressing him down. By the time darkness fell, he was still shooting. His arms ached, his legs trembled, but his spirit felt lighter. As he picked up his bag and turned to leave, he whispered into the night, "I'll prove them wrong. I don't care how long it takes." The court stood silent, but inside, something had shifted. The whispers of doubt hadn't disappeared, but now, they had competition, his own voice, quiet but determined, finally learning how to fight back. The storm came quietly at first, small things, piling one over the other. A bad grade on a test he had studied hard for. A group of boys in the hallway knocking his books to the floor with mocking laughs. The coach's disapproving glance when he missed yet another shot in practice. Each moment felt like a stone, added to a backpack he was already struggling to carry. By the time he got home, his chest was tight, his thoughts heavy, his eyes burning with unspilled tears. He closed the door to his room and sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the floor. His fists clenched against his knees. He could feel the pressure building, like a balloon stretched too thin, ready to burst. He thought about quitting basketball, quitting trying so hard, quitting the endless fight to prove himself in a world that seemed determined to push him down. What was the point anyway? No matter how many hours he practiced, no matter how much he tried to be strong, the world only saw his failures. The room was silent, but inside there was chaos. "You'll never make it. You're wasting your time. Maybe they're right about you." He grabbed the basketball lying by his desk and hurled it at the wall. It bounced back, thudding against the floor before rolling slowly to a stop at his feet. He stared at it, chest heaving, tears blurring his vision. And then, as if summoned by his pain, his father's photograph on the dresser caught his eye. The old, Faded picture showed a younger man holding him as a baby, smiling with a pride that felt almost unreal now. His father had been gone for years, but that smile, warm, unshaken, looked directly at him, as if still believing. Something inside cracked open. He fell back onto the bed, tears streaming freely now, shoulders shaking. For once, he didn't try to hide it. He didn't pretend to be strong. He let it all pour out. The frustration, the loneliness, the fear. Minutes passed, maybe hours, but when he finally sat up again, the storm inside had shifted. He was exhausted, but strangely lighter, as though admitting the pain had made room for something else. He picked up the basketball again, this time gently. His hands traced the rough texture of the leather, the familiar feel grounding him. He whispered into the empty room, voice hoarse, "I can't give up. Not now. Not ever." The words weren't loud. They weren't triumphant, but they were real. Later that night, unable to sleep, he slipped out of the house. The court was dark, the street lamps flickering. He stood under the hoop, breathing in the cool night air, his ball tucked under his arm. The silence wrapped around him, but it didn't feel suffocating anymore. It felt waiting. He dribbled once, twice. The sound echoed against the empty buildings. He took a shot, missed. Another, missed. But he didn't stop. Shot after shot, miss after miss. He kept going, his body moving through exhaustion, through pain, through everything. By dawn, his shirt was soaked, his muscles screamed, and yet, he smiled for the first time in weeks. Not because he had won, not because he was the best, but because he was still standing, because he had faced the breaking point and chosen not to break. The sun rose behind him, golden light spilling over the court. He looked up at the hoop, sweat dripping from his brow, and whispered, "This isn't the end. It's only the beginning." And with that, he shot again. This time, the ball swished clean through the net. The morning air was sharp, cutting against his lungs with every breath, but he didn't mind. Sweat clung to his skin. His legs trembled with fatigue, yet his eyes carried a fire that had not been there the night before. He stood at the edge of the cracked court, staring at the hoop like it was the only thing that mattered in the universe. This was no longer about proving something to his classmates, his coach, or even his family. It was about proving something to himself, that he could endure, that he could rise no matter how many times life tried to bury him. The neighborhood began to stir as the sun stretched higher. Old men shuffled to porches with newspapers. Women with scarves over their heads hurried down sidewalks. Kids pedaled by on bicycles. A few glanced at him, confused by the sight of a teenager still shooting hoops after a night that seemed to have stretched into forever. But he ignored them. He was alone in his battle, and for the first time, he was okay with that. Each shot was more than a practice. It was a declaration. "I am still here. I will not stop." His arms ached, his lungs burned, but his body moved with rhythm, as though pain had become part of the music. The ball slapped against the pavement, echoed off brick walls, kissed the rim, and sometimes slipped through with the sweet sound of success. Other times it bounced away, mocking him, daring him to quit. But he no longer flinched at failure. He retrieved it, shot again, again, again. The sun rose higher, spilling light across the court. His shadow stretched long and thin, dancing with him as he dribbled and shot. He thought of the nights when loneliness swallowed him whole, of the mornings when self-doubt tried to choke him. And then he thought of this moment, his body breaking, yet his spirit refusing to bend. Hours passed. His shirt clung to him, drenched. His sneakers scraped the pavement raw. The rim became blurry through sweat-filled eyes, but his focus never faltered. With every jump, every release, he repeated the vow that had saved him in the darkness. "I can't give up. Not now. Not ever." By midday, he collapsed onto the ground, back against the pole of the hoop. His chest heaved, heart pounding like a drum. The ball rolled lazily across the court, coming to rest in the golden sunlight. He stared at it, exhausted but alive. And for the first time, he allowed himself to dream. Not a fragile wish, not a distant fantasy, but a vision so vivid it made his breath catch. He saw himself not as the boy everyone doubted, but as the man who rose through the storm, the man who turned silent struggles into roaring triumphs. He saw stadium lights, roaring crowds, a jersey with his name on it. Not because others said he could, but because he had refused to stop when every reason told him to. As he sat there, lost in that vision, a voice startled him. "You've been out here all night?" He turned. An older neighbor stood by the chain-link fence, shaking his head in disbelief. The man's eyes softened, as though he saw more than sweat and exhaustion. He saw the fight, the hunger, the unspoken pain. The boy only nodded, wiping his face with the back of his arm. The neighbor gave a small smile. "Keep that fire, son. It'll take you further than talent ever could." The words landed deep, sinking into the soil of his spirit like seeds. He stood slowly, picked up the ball again, and held it against his chest. His heart beat steady beneath it, matching the rhythm of resolve. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about becoming. The court, the pain, the endless nights, they were no longer signs of struggle. They were proof of transformation. And as the day stretched forward, he whispered once more, louder this time, with a voice that carried across the empty streets. "This is just the beginning." The night had returned, draping the small town in a hush of quiet. Street lamps buzzed faintly, moths dancing in their glow, while the empty court waited under a blanket of stars. He walked back slowly, his body sore from the hours of work, but his mind strangely light, as if a weight had finally been lifted. The court looked different tonight. It was still cracked, the net still torn, the paint on the lines nearly faded, but to him, it had become something more. It was no longer just a broken place where he hid from the world. It had become his sanctuary, his battleground, and his church. He bounced the ball once. The sound echoed against the brick walls, a reminder that even in silence, he wasn't truly alone. Every bounce carried the memories of his silent tears, his whispered promises, his aching nights. This ground had absorbed all of it, and in return, it had given him strength. His breath misted in the cool air as he stared at the hoop. He knew no one was watching. There was no crowd, no coach, no cheer to validate his effort. And yet, this was the most important game of his life. Because this one wasn't about winning against someone else. It was about winning against himself. He dribbled once, twice, 3 times, then stepped back. His legs trembled, but his eyes stayed fixed. He lifted, released, and let the ball fly. For a heartbeat, the world held still. The sound of crickets stopped in his ears. The breeze froze against his skin. The ball spun, a lonely arc against the night sky. And then swish. Clean. Perfect. A laugh escaped him, sudden and raw, carried into the night air. He dropped to his knees, not from defeat, but from triumph. Because in that single shot, he understood. Victory wasn't about trophies or applause. It was about moments like this, unseen, uncelebrated, yet undeniable. He stayed on the ground, staring at the stars above. His chest heaved, sweat cooling against his skin. And somewhere in that moment, he realized something deeper. Pain wasn't his enemy. It had been his greatest teacher. Every tear had carved resilience. Every failure had sharpened his focus. Every lonely night had built a fire inside him. He whispered into the quiet, voice trembling but sure. "My struggle is my strength. My silence is my power. My time is coming." The wind carried his words, scattering them into the night, as if the universe itself had heard his oath. He stood again, brushing dirt from his knees. He picked up the ball and hugged it close, the way one might hold onto a friend who never left their side. His body was exhausted, but his spirit blazed like wildfire. As he walked home through the dimly lit streets, his steps no longer dragged. They carried a rhythm, almost like a march. He wasn't walking away in defeat. He was walking toward his future. Neighbors watching from porches saw only a tired boy returning home. They couldn't see the battle he had fought, the victory he had claimed. They didn't hear the voice inside him that refused to be silenced. But one day they would. One day, the world would know the strength that had been forged in these quiet struggles. One day, the silence of this boy would erupt into a roar so powerful it would shake everything that once tried to break him. Tonight, though, it was enough that he knew. Because greatness doesn't begin with applause. It begins in the shadows, in the tears no one sees, in the endless nights where quitting would be easier, but fighting feels necessary. And as he reached his door, the boy turned one last time toward the empty court, glowing faintly in the distance under the streetlight. He smiled, not because the pain was over, but because he finally understood it. The pain behind his struggle had not broken him. It had built him. Throughout our story, one phrase keeps returning: silent struggles. Let's break that down. Struggles means battles, difficulties, or hardships. When we say silent struggles, it means the battles you fight privately, the challenges no one else sees. Another powerful word we saw was resilience. Resilience is the ability to recover quickly after difficulties. Think of it as inner strength, the bounce-back power of the human spirit. We also used the phrase forged in the shadows. Forged means shaped or created through heat and pressure, like metal and fire. In life, when we say forged in the shadows, it means strength built through unseen pain, silent effort, and private sacrifice. Finally, one of the key expressions was, pain is not your enemy, it is your teacher. This metaphor reminds us that every difficulty carries a lesson, and those lessons shape who we become. So next time you face challenges, remember these words. They are not just vocabulary. They are survival tools. Embrace your struggles. The difficulties you face today are shaping the person you need to be tomorrow. Don't run from them. Learn from them. Consistency builds greatness. It's not the applause of the crowd, but the discipline of the lonely nights that creates true success. Redefine victory. Winning is not only about beating others, it's about overcoming yourself. Transform pain into power. Every hardship has a hidden lesson. The moment you accept it as a teacher, you become unstoppable. So here's the truth. Greatness does not begin with bright lights, trophies, or applause. It begins in silence, in the moments when no one is watching, in the pain you carry alone, and in the tears that never make it to the surface. But if you choose to rise, again and again, your silent struggles will one day become your loudest victories. Remember this. You are not defined by the pain you endure, but by the strength you create from it. And when the world finally hears your story, they won't just see your success. They'll feel your journey. That is the power behind greatness.